Empire. More comings and goings on the quarterback free agent front, and the quarantine rolls on. We're still trying to stay healthy, still trying to maintain sanity. What's up, everybody? Thanks for coming back for another episode of the Football Jones podcast. I am Mike Jones. You can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. And yes, as I said, the NFL free agency, NFL offseason rolls on. So too does the coronavirus restrictions and the quarantine. We should have the release of the regular season schedule sometime this week, towards the end of the week. But until then, we're talking about the quarterback market, assessing a couple last tidbits of the draft, and I'm joined by Jim Trotter of the NFL Network as we break it all down. Really good episode coming up here. He's always full of a lot of insight, and so I wanted to have him come on, talk about what all of it means. Also, a bit of news. Don Shula, legendary coach of the Miami Dolphins, passed today, Monday, the age of 90. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family. What a really storied career in life he had. Don Shula, rest in peace. And now, when I come back, we'll be joined by Jim Trotter of the NFL Network. All right, and we're very happy and honored to have back Jim Trotter of the NFL Network, one of the absolute best in the biz, guy I really look up to. And if you are not following him, follow him, because every time he talks or writes, you're going to learn something. So very happy to have him here on the podcast. Trot, how are you doing?
I'm like everybody else, my man. I'm just trying to get through it, and hoping and praying that at some point we get control of this thing and we can start to return to some sense of normalcy, whatever that may be.
Yeah. Now, how are the guns? Are they shrinking because you haven't been to your UFC club in a while? I don't imagine. You haven't had your workouts. How are you maintaining?
I'm not sure what guns you're talking about. I think you've been watching the state capitol in Michigan. But as far as workouts go, I've been wearing out the Peloton bike. It's the only thing that kind of gives you a bit of sanity during all this. And on a serious note, the hard part is you realize that, like, at the gyms you go to, those are folks who aren't getting paid right now. Right. And so you feel for them. And, at our gym, they were like, well, we're not going to charge you guys your dues while we're closed. And fortunately, I'm like, look, you can charge me because I'm in a position where, I can handle it. And hopefully it helps those who need it, because they're not making much money as it is. So you just, you and I were talking earlier, the longer this goes, you realize, the closer it gets to you, and you realize the impact that it has on those around you. And it's hard. So it's funny you bring up the gym, because that one, I'll do some Zoom classes with, or FaceTime classes with some of the coaches there, while out in my garage. But it's tough, man. I'm rambling because it's tough. It hurts.
It is. I had from last year I had knee surgery, so I couldn't go to the gym. So I got those resistance bands. I was trying to do the Tom Brady resistance band workout. But that's gotten so old. I need the regular gym, so I'll be glad when that comes back. But anyway, we're here to talk about the NFL, because the off season is trickling along, and we don't know how long it's going to last and if we'll be back to normal. But I wanted to get your thoughts on the draft. Obviously, the top of the draft is what everybody really pays most closely attention to, and kind of just what your takeaways were from what we saw, some of these teams out there, and how they helped themselves or didn't help themselves.
Mike, I'm one of those people. I know right after the draft, everyone wants to grade it and define who did well and who didn't. I've never been one of those guys from this standpoint. And this, during the year, there just isn't time to watch college games very often. And so I try not to make predictions or evaluations of people that I have not seen much of, and I don't do that. So it looks like on paper, obviously, that many of these teams help themselves. But then there were a couple, I think, that, and those are easier to speak to, who did help themselves. And for me, the most glaring one was Green Bay.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those people, I don't have a problem with them drafting Jordan Love in the first round, even trading up to get him, because it's a quarterback-driven league. And if you believe that this guy is truly a franchise guy, you go get him. Even if your starter is a future Hall of Famer who's 36 years old and has at least a few years left, if not more, I still believe if you have an opportunity to go get a franchise quarterback on a rookie deal, you go do it, and then you go from there. What stood out to me was what they did after that, and this is the issue I have. If we say that their most pressing need going into the draft was wide receiver, and getting help for Aaron Rodgers after 2 years ago, you sign him to a $134 million extension, knowing that this window is only open for so long. Well, you've got 8 other picks after Jordan Love, and you don't draft one wide receiver there. And beyond that, your second-round pick you use on a running back, which happens to be arguably the strongest position on your offense outside of quarterback, with Aaron Jones, who ran for nearly 1,100 yards and 16 touchdowns last year. That, to me, doesn't make sense. And then using a third-round pick on a sleeper tight end, again, not perimeter help, that doesn't make sense to me. So for me, it's easier to comment on those clubs where I don't understand what they did, as opposed to, I think everyone else kind of followed suit and made moves that you hope and they appear will help their teams if everything goes right.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The other one that I thought was intriguing was the Patriots' decision not to draft a quarterback. I didn't know if they were going to jump up to try to get somebody, or if they were going to get somebody in the 3rd or 4th round, and not getting one. And then the other day, Andy Dalton's out there. They don't get him. I'm almost starting to believe that unless they're just waiting for Cam Newton to be able to take a physical, they must really believe in Jarrett Stidham.
Look, they like him, but I also believe, and this is just my belief, that Bill Belichick has to feel that he's playing with house money this year. When you lose Tom Brady, they've let some other guys go. I don't know that Joe Thuney, the franchise, is going to remain with the club this season. It's possible they could seek to move him after, although it's harder to do after the draft. Obviously, you have less leverage. But I think that Bill Belichick knows that he's playing with house money in year one after Tom Brady, and they might get a really good look at Stidham. Now, I know within the organization I've heard that they really like him, but it's one thing to like a guy without seeing him actually under fire, and it's another thing to see him, when it's a real game. So I think they are going to give him the opportunity to be the guy. Everyone has to start somewhere. Look back at Tom Brady when he came in for Drew Bledsoe. Nobody knew who Tom was. It was a 6th-round pick. Many folks, I'm sure, in New England thought, the season's over after Tom came in, and we know what happened at that point. So if there's one coach at this point I'm not going to question, it's Bill Belichick. Based on his history and his championships, he deserves the benefit of the doubt. So I'm going to wait it out and see how it plays out. But, yeah, I think you're right. I think at this point, Jarrett Stidham is going to be the guy.
Yeah, another team quarterback issue that I'm very curious to see it play out is the Eagles taking Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round. I can't blame them, though, because, poor Carson Wentz has not finished a season the last 3 years. Last year, at least, he played the full regular season, but got hurt a quarter into the playoffs. And so getting a talented young quarterback when you had the opportunity to, I think that they kind of almost had to. Could they have traded back and maybe, gotten him a little bit later? Possibly, but I felt like if you really like the guy, you go get him because you don't know if he's going to be there.
Like I said to you earlier, it's a quarterback-driven league, and if you have a chance to get a guy that you believe is a difference maker, you get him, and then you go from there. Look, I remember, when I was covering the Chargers and they made the trade on draft day and sent Eli Manning to the Giants and acquired Phillip Rivers, and you've got Drew Brees on the roster. And obviously at that point, Drew Brees wasn't who he is today. We didn't know. but they had used a second-round pick on him a few years earlier. So all of a sudden, Drew in 2004 has a breakout year, and Phillip is sitting there on the bench for 2 years. And, the Chargers' feeling at that point was, look, we're in a great situation. We've got what we believe are 2 franchise quarterbacks. We know we're going to have to move one of them at some point just from a cost standpoint. Now, if Drew hadn't gotten hurt in 2006, I believe it was. No, it was 2005, end of 2005. Imagine what they would have been able to acquire for either Drew or Phillip Rivers, whomever they chose to move. So with Jalen Hurts, I agree. If you believe that he's that talent, then you go get him and you see what happens. And Carson has not been able to stay healthy, and you're going to need a capable backup. And the only thing I don't like about it is people comparing him to Taysom Hill.
Yes.
They're 2 different guys,
right.
He is a bona fide quarterback, always has been. And I think he should be viewed in that way.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. He's not a gimmicky, gadgety guy. He's a passer. He's definitely improved since from the end of the season, heading into the Senior Bowl. People were saying, 4th, 5th round guy. He worked on his accuracy and mechanics, interviewed really well, and people really thought, not just the Eagles saw him as a potential 2nd round pick. So yeah, he's a quarterback. Yes, can he go out there and could they line both of them up together at the same time and do some creative things? Yeah, but I mean, I agree with you. I don't like the Taysom Hill comparisons. I know Jalen Hurts does not like those comparisons because Taysom Hill has thrown 7 passes. Jalen Hurts is a guy that is more a pure passer. And we're not going to see him running down on special teams. We're not going to see him, lining up at tight end unless they're, I just don't see that. But again, I think just given Carson's history, I think we'll see him starting games for them. It could happen this year.
Sure. You can never rule that out. So I'm with you. And look, I'm rooting for the kid because I thought the way he handled the Alabama situation and coming back to Oklahoma and playing the way that he did, he showed himself to be a class individual. So, he's going to go in there and work his butt off, and I hope for nothing but success for him.
Yeah, I agree with you. There was one thing that in talking to people around the league afterwards, hey, what'd you think of the draft? I even had some people hit me up from different organizations say, what did you think? What did you have noticed? And we were reminded, I liked the packaging. I liked we were able to see the GMs in their houses, the coaches in their houses, the player. But it was a painful reminder for a lot of people of color in the league who are aspiring to work up those ranks, how few general managers we had. Andrew Berry in Cleveland and Chris Greer in Miami, only Black GMs, very few Black head coaches. And guys were watching that saying, man, when are we going to get the opportunity? They already knew there were few, but just seeing it, and I know some who are not in front offices anymore, it stung them watching it as well. What did you hear about that? What did it say to you?
No, Mike, we've been talking about this for a while, and it is an issue, and it's disheartening for men of color who are hoping to climb that ladder and get in a position one day to run a team. It's tough. It's tough to see that, but we knew what it was going to look like. I'll never forget Sean Payton saying to me last year when talking about the owners meeting a year ago and how they take that picture every year of all the coaches, the 32 coaches. And he talked about, if you want to understand just how much, or if you want to understand the lack of diversity among head coaches in the NFL, just bring out that picture.
Yeah.
And it'll tell you everything you need to know. Well, the sad part is the general manager photo was even worse than the coaching photo at that time. So there's no question it's an issue. But look, I always go back to this. It's not a league issue. It is an ownership issue because the league does not hire general managers. The league does not hire head coaches. Owners do. And you and I both know the league has done a lot of work to try and address any concerns that owners may have about why minorities are not being hired into those positions. And I don't know that the league can do much more. It can't mandate that an owner hire a particular individual. So you have to get to the owners and get them to a point where they see the value in diversity and inclusion And these men are looked at in the same way others are. And I'll give you this, because I've talked to a lot of assistant coaches, minority assistant coaches, minorities who hope aspire to be a general manager one day. And they keep coming back. The thing they keep coming back to me with in our conversations is they believe that one of the big issues is really a lack of comfort by white men and women with people who don't look like them, maybe sound like them, have the same background experiences as them. And somehow we've got to find a way to bridge that gap there. I know there have been discussions about bringing in minority candidates to the owners' meetings for informal sessions with owners so that they can get to know each other away from, their teams, that sort of thing. But I'm one of those people right now who kind of throws up his hands and says, I don't know what the answer is anymore. Because even with like coaches, it's not a pipeline issue.
Yeah.
Every time I hear that, it drives me nuts, because there are many minority candidates on the offensive side of the ball. But the other thing here is Tony Dungy said to me, owners don't know what they're looking for in head coach. They don't know how to hire head coaches. And I'll never forget at the end of last season, I know I'm rambling here for a minute, but at the end of last season, we had a roundtable discussion on air. And the host asked me, well, who are some of the minority candidates that should be considered? And my response was, see, that's the wrong question to ask right off the bat.
Right.
It should not be about who are the names we should consider. It should be, what are we looking for in a head coach? Do we want someone with head coaching experience or not? Do we want someone on the offensive side of the ball or not? Do we want someone who is hands-on, or do we want someone who's a delegator? Do we want someone who can handle the public demands of the position, or are we okay with someone who is more of an introvert and just the locker room coaching staff type guy? Do we want a teacher? Do we want to motivate? All these questions have to be answered, should be answered before you ever get around to saying who are the names that we should be considering. And unfortunately, I don't think that happens enough.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it was funny timing. I know it's coincidence, but the week after the draft, and as people are talking about the lack of diversity in the general manager ranks, the Bulls over there in the NBA hire a black GM, and there are a number of former players who have been able to climb the ranks as coaches, as general managers, as top talent evaluators in the NBA, whereas those opportunities just aren't there in the NFL. Why do you think the NBA is so much different? Because rich, white guys own NBA teams just like they own NFL teams, but there's more of an opportunity for growth, and it seems like they see the players as, it's a player-driven league, and they want to give those players the opportunities to continue to build and grow, and it transitions past their playing days, and there's not a problem where they don't trust them to make decisions. Elton Brand became a GM, what was he, 2 years retired or something like that? I just don't know. Why do you think it is that the NBA is so much different than the NFL?
It's a great question. I'm not sure I have the right answer. I think the one thing you said is definitely true. It is more of a player-driven league. And the one thing you see between the NBA versus the NFL is that there genuinely seems to be more of a partnership between the players and the league, meaning, and that includes the owners, than there is in the NFL. And there is almost a feeling, if you will, that in the NFL, you are employees. Whereas in the NBA, the players are viewed as partners to some degree. And I'm not saying that is the way that it is. I'm saying that is the perception. That is the feel. And if you have something where you feel that it is more of a partnership, it makes it easier to get in those positions of authority, I would think. So I don't have the answer for you. I can only say what it feels like on the outside. And we've seen through the collective bargaining agreement process that with the NBA and its players, the players seem to have a lot more clout. And I don't want, power may be too strong a word, but influence when it comes to that relationship than you have in the NFL.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And I don't know what's going to change it, but maybe time will. Maybe it's a generational thing that eventually these.
Well, you would hope, Mike, but we've gone backwards. When we think about the Rooney, for instance, the Rooney Rule coming in the early 80s, and we saw an increase in the numbers of minority head coaches and the number of minority general managers over the course of time. And now we've gone the other way. And my fear, at least as it relates to head coaches, is when you keep moving the bar, and it used to be back in the day where you had to be a defensive coach to become a head coach. And that's why guys like Mike Tomlin and Tony Dungy and those guys went over the defensive side of the ball so that they could climb that ladder. And now we're told, well, the fastest way is to be an offensive coordinator. And so it's going to take time for people of color to get over in those positions. And my fear is that once they do, then you're going to move the bar again and say, well, we're looking for something else.
Right.
And even having said that, the thing that's so troubling about where we are with this process is we have a guy, in Eric Bieniemy, who would appear to check all of the boxes. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs and head coach Andy Reid coming off his tree. Doug Peterson was the offensive coordinator. He didn't call plays. He got a head coaching job in Philadelphia. Matt Nagy succeeds him. He doesn't call plays. He gets a head job in Chicago. Then you have Eric Bieniemy come in, who's the first person of color now in this tree that we're talking about here, and he doesn't call plays, yet he has a league MVP at quarterback, and he has a Super Bowl MVP at quarterback, back-to-back years, and he can't get a head coaching job. Why is that? I mean, nobody has given me a good explanation on how we could have all these openings, and a guy who followed the same path as the men who preceded him can't get a head job, but those two men who preceded him did. That's why guys feel so frustrated, and at times there's almost a sense of hopelessness because they're saying, we have done everything you've asked.
Yeah.
We have done everything that our predecessors have done, and yet we can't take that final step, but they can. So it's a tough situation.
Yeah, and you said it, and that was exactly what somebody told me yesterday. We were texting. They said the finish line keeps changing, so I didn't even know, how to look at this thing. I do want to get your thoughts on the free agent quarterback market. We saw another guy, become available in Andy Dalton, and he signs with Dallas. I thought maybe he was going to wind up in Jacksonville, reunited with Jay Gruden, or maybe the Patriots would have. But it was kind of curious that see him wind up with Dallas, who still doesn't have a long-term deal worked out for Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I was surprised by that a little bit too. And it's funny, everybody wants to take a position. Did the Cowboys disrespect Dak? Are they sending a message to Dak? All those sorts of things. I would make the argument that both things can be true. That one, this was a smart business move, and that two, it's a leverage play against Dak. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Look, Andy Dalton has won games in this league. He hasn't won in the postseason, but he's won regular season games. He is a good quarterback. And if you are the Dallas Cowboys and you have a chance to get a good quarterback at a reduced rate, you do it. As we said, it's a quarterback-driven league. Now, as far as what it means for Dak, the hard part here is we hear these numbers thrown out about where the Cowboys and Dak are in negotiations, but we hear general numbers. We don't know the details. What are the guarantees? What are the guarantees over the first few years? All those sorts of things that are important to a player, as opposed to, well, it's $100+ million deal and it's going to average 30+ a year. That doesn't mean anything.
No, right.
So until we hear the details, I'm not going to sit here and say that one side is wrong or the other. I need to hear the details. Look, Dak is a really good quarterback who I believe is going to continue to get better. He deserves to be paid. It's not about whether or not he's the best quarterback in the league at this point, being if he's the highest paid. That doesn't matter. We all know. Once the floor is set by someone, the next quarterback, because of timing and whatnot and circumstance, is going to surpass that regardless of who it is. So I think Dak's going to get paid. I think this deal's going to get done before, we get to training camp, and everything will be fine, in my opinion. It's not always pretty. The process is not always pretty, and I think sometimes we forget that. But Dak will be paid. And look, Mike, here's the truth, and this may not be popular, But if he is not paid on a multi-year deal, play it out. Do the
Yeah,
Kirk Cousins thing.
exactly.
Look, that's as close as you get to guaranteed money. You play for $30 million this year,
Right.
and I'm using round numbers. Play for $30 million this year. Fine, you come back next year. You have a great year. You come back next year. If they don't want to give you what you want, let them franchise you again, because then you're going to get $36 million. You've now made $66 million over 2 years,
Right.
and we know they're not going to franchise you a third year because of the cost there. So now you get to go out on the open market, or you have the Cowboys pay you what you believe you're worth, and you're going to cash in then. So I'm not one of these people who goes crazy and says he's got to get a multi-year deal. I'm a bet on myself.
Yeah.
And I think if more players bet on themselves, there's an opportunity to make even more money than they can on a multi-year deal.
Yeah, and he's a guy who's proven himself to be durable as well,
Yes.
Just like Cousins, 4th-round pick, guy who hasn't missed a game since he's been, a starter. I think that it's the way to go for him because, like you said, he's going to wind up being okay. And I think that mentality of a guy who was a 4th-rounder, he's used to taking bets on himself.
Look, I'm me personally, and it's not my money. So it's always easy for us to say things when it's not our money. But he's going to get $30 million this year. And again, I'm using round numbers, which is obviously a significant amount over what he's earned in his career. I think he's going to be okay. And I think he'll have a great year and then go back out and cash in again, one way or the other. I mean, that's the thing. And teams know this, that players and some agents are they want to get that money early. They want to lock it up early. But if you're being strictly a businessman, you look at the way guys like Darrelle Revis did it, and I used to call Darrelle, and I meant it respectfully, was a mercenary.
Right.
It wasn't about the team. It wasn't about the game or whatever. It was about his business, his money. And he let you know that that's what he was about. He was going to go out and do his job, and he wanted to be compensated for it. So if more players take that attitude, maybe we get closer to guaranteed money.
Exactly. And now when you said that line, it's not my money, it's a perfect transition because one quarterback who I'm concerned about is Jameis Winston. Look, great opportunity, I think, for him to go to New Orleans and learn from Drew Brees and Sean Payton. But $1.1 million. I mean, I know he threw 33 interceptions, but I just felt like he's got to be able to command a little more than that. Then is seeing Andy Dalton get a $7 million deal with $3 million guaranteed. I'm just curious, and talking to people around the league, they're like, man, I don't know about this kid's decision-making. I think that he's, I was told, somebody said, I think he's trying to continue this narrative of being humble and wanting to show that he's teachable and wants to learn, but he's almost taking it too far. But I don't know. Again, it's not my money. And I had tweeted something about it. And Lorenzo Alexander, very smart guy, a lot of success in this league, replied to me. He said, why? He said, he's financially secure.
I saw that.
Yeah. And I mean, in a way, he's right. But at the same time, I'm like, man, but like, what about your worth? Like, were you too desperate? I don't know.
No, and that's the thing, Mike, truthfully. And I saw your exchange with Lorenzo, and I do think he was right. We always project our expectations and our values onto other people. And if Jameis, who has made a nice amount of money here over his rookie deal, believes that this is the best situation and he's taking the long view for him down the road, more power to him. Look, $1 million is nothing to laugh at. I get it in the realm of NFL dollars and whatnot. But if he believes that this is going to make him better in the long term, which means that he is able to extend his earnings and increase his earnings down the road, more power to him. My only thing with Jameis is I'm not so sure what he is going to learn here that he hasn't already been taught. When it comes to ball security, it is what it is. And the thing about Jameis, and I know some people talk about, well, his trajectory right now is not unlike that of, say, Peyton Manning over his first years or some other notable quarterbacks. The difference between all of them is when you start looking at crunch time, as I talk to people about it. When you look at with a quarterback, one of the things that you want to know is how does he perform in the fourth quarter of one-score games? And when you look at Jameis, to be truthful, our research team went back and looked at the numbers, and they are not very good. Like he was down near the bottom among the 32 qualifying quarterbacks in passer rating. He was number one in terms of turnovers in the fourth quarter of one-score games. His completion percentage was down in the bottom. All of these things, these factors that you look at as being important to winning games in crunch time, he did not rate well in. The other thing here is if you look at his touchdown to turnover ratio, and I'm talking about passing and rushing touchdowns versus interceptions and lost fumbles. The last 3 years, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, I think I'm right. I think I remember him right. A year ago, he was -1. The year before that, he was +1. And the year before that, he was +2. So if we're talking about a quarterback, and we know teams preach ball security, those are not numbers that are going to land you a big money deal, or even at this point, unfortunately, a starting deal. So the question that I'm fascinated by with Jameis is, after 5 seasons, is he what he is, or can he change? And some people would say the die has been cast. I'm not going that far yet, but he's got to prove some people wrong.
I do think the one area that maybe this can help him, and one longtime coach told me, he said, I feel like every time when I watch and study him, it looks like he's guessing. And that's a lot of the reason for a lot of his turnovers. So maybe if he goes into that organization and he's sitting behind Drew Brees, watching the way he studies film, watching the way he prepares, maybe it'll help him realize, okay, I need to put in more work in the classroom, in the film room, so that way I'm not guessing when I'm going out here and pulling the trigger on these passes. And maybe that can help him. But
yeah, my God, no, I don't buy it. I'm saying that from this standpoint. Jameis's work ethic has never been in question, and anyone around Tampa that I know will tell you he puts in the work, he puts in the hours. So I don't think it's so much about studying anymore. I think some people are just wired a certain way that when the pressure and the heat starts to come,
right,
they respond to it a certain way. And look, he's been coached by Bruce Arians, Dirk Cutter, Jimbo Fisher. These are all guys who are known to be pretty good or really good offensive coaches. So, and I get Sean Payton, I've always said, is one of the best when it comes to offensive game planning and whatnot. But I don't know that Sean is that much better than Bruce Arians or Jimbo Fisher or Dirk Cutter when we talk about these guys, that sort of thing. So I hope Jameis gets what he wants out of New Orleans. I just don't know.
Well, we'll see. If it worked out well for Teddy Bridgewater, but a little bit different. He was coming off of injuries.
And he was not known as a turnover machine either before that injury.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just going to be interesting to see if Jameis gets on the field, even if he does get hurt. I mean, they're paying Taysom Hill a lot of money now, but I do feel like if they really believe that Taysom Hill was the future, he would have started those 5 games last year instead of Teddy Bridgewater, and I feel like they probably wouldn't have brought in Jameis Winston if they thought that he was really the future. So anyway, hey, Trot, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for your insight and everything. It's always a pleasure. I've learned more things. I know everybody listening has. Tell everybody where they can find you. They already probably know, but just in case.
You can find me out in San Diego, quarantined. How's that? Oh, man, you know what I got to do when we get off this call? I got to go work on a background because I'm looking at yours, and it's so fly, and all I've got is clutter behind me. So I've got work to do. I got to use this quarantine time to get to work in this storage room and clean everything up. So I appreciate you making me look bad that way.
Hey, this is actually my oldest son's room. He wanted to redo this whole thing. You see the Jordans in the background up on the shelves and the logo. This is all his vision, and so we finally got it all together. And so it's the best background in the house. So I had to
call. It looks good, man.
It
looks good.
Hey, Timmy, I need your room again. He's how long? So maybe Timmy can give you some interior design skills with the J's and everything like that.
I was going to say, send him on out here. So, he can come hang with us for a little while, help me get this thing straight.
There we go. All right. Well, I appreciate you, my brother. Thanks a lot for your time, and I'll see you soon.
My pleasure, man. Anytime.
All right. Hope you guys enjoyed that. It's going to be interesting to see how all of these moves play out. As Trotter said, you really can never tell with the draft till a couple years. Same thing with the free agency market. You can't tell right away. We know there are questions. We can kind of connect some dots, but we'll see if some of these moves wind up paying off for these teams, paying off for the players. But that's part of the intrigue and why we love the NFL so much. Hope you guys have a great day. You can read me again at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. Thanks for listening. Take this link, share it with your friends. Go on there, give me a review, and I will talk to you again next week.